Welcome back to For Goodness Sake, where I find kernels of goodness within my former beliefs as a Mormon and link them to my new, more secular worldview. Today's topic, truth and the source of truth. I want to start out by talking about how I used to consider truth as a Mormon. I used to think about truth as knowledge from God. In other words, truth always comes from God. It's the only source of truth. I used to think of science as really just a way for us humans to access truth from God in a little bit of a different way from the way we would in a religious context. In a religious context, I considered truth to be something that comes directly from God, either straight to my own individual mind or to the mind of a prophet who can tell me about what God would say. As a matter of fact, as I'm going to show you what I used to do for people who were learning about the church when I was a missionary. I used to tell them, here's us down here, here's God up here with all the truth, and then I'd pull out one of my pens or pencils that I happen to have on me, and I'd say, the pen is the prophet. It links God to earth. Truth flows down the pen to us on earth. So I want to give you two contrasting examples of how this plays out in the real world, how the source of truth matters. I'm going to compare the Book of Abraham, which is an episode or an element really of Mormon church history, with the Rosetta Stone. So let me tell you a little bit about the Book of Abraham. And of course, you can get a lot more detail on this on other sources online, but I'm going to give you the quick version. So basically, here were the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Ohio in the early 1830s. Joseph Smith is the prophet. He's already translated the Book of Mormon. And again, everybody believes, as I did, that truth comes from God through his prophet, right? Along comes an antiquities dealer who happens to have some mummies and some actual ancient Egyptian scrolls. And he shows them to Joseph and the members of the church, and Joseph purchases them and says, oh, look, I can read this. It says right here that this is a record from Abraham. Abraham wrote this. Wow, what are the odds? How wonderful. And he proceeds to translate from those scrolls what we now have as the Book of Abraham. This Book of Abraham is still in LDS scripture to this day. Now, at the time, in the early 1830s, most people believed that ancient Egyptian, specifically hieroglyphics, which is what was written on these scrolls, was impossible to read. No one had any idea how to do it. Now, we're going to find out in a second that that wasn't quite true. It was just unknown to these people at this time in Ohio. But in any case, they didn't think anybody would ever be able to double check Joseph Smith's translation. So they just took it at face value. Well, yeah, God has told us that this is what's on here. It's a record of Abraham, and now we have it. Isn't that wonderful? Okay. Now let's talk about the Rosetta Stone. So in 1799, Napoleon's army found this stone. And they immediately recognized the importance because on the stone it had hieroglyphics, it had Greek, and it had another language. I'm not an expert. I'm not even going to try to say what the name of the other language. Anyway, it has three languages spelling out what appeared to be the same message in three different languages. But they couldn't read it. They could only read the Greek. The British end up conquering that part of Egypt and bringing the stone back to London. And that's where it is to this day. So it's been there for over 200 years in the British Museum in London. The Rosetta Stone took many years to figure out how to read. So like I say, it was 1799 that it was found, and they immediately knew the significance of it. 1802 when it arrives in London. But it was still 20 years later before even a first draft of the script could be produced, interpreting the hieroglyphics in a meaningful way. And it was actually a Frenchman named Champollion I'm sure I'm not saying the name right, but anyway, Champollion, or however you say his name, building on the work of an Englishman named Young, who was finally able to crack the code. So the point I want to make here is that real knowledge comes from the hard work of figuring things out in a way that you can prove to others that this is really happening. In other words, Champollion didn't sit down with it and say, yeah, okay, that kind of looks like maybe something Abraham would say, and write out a whole new document and say, yep, that's it. Yep, I translated it. No. He had to carefully compare word by word, sound by sound, piecing things together until he could make sense out of what it was in a way that he could show others, look, here's exactly what the script says, and here's exactly the translation, and have it be verified and reviewed by others. So to complete the story here, the papyrus that Joseph Smith used to create the Book of Abraham was thought to be lost for over 100 years until it was found, I believe in the 1960s or so, and translated by actual Egyptologists, that because of the Rosetta Stone and the work that was done by Young and Champollion earlier, they were able to just read it and say, oh, but we know ancient Egyptian. We can read hieroglyphics now. This is what it says. Does it match what Joseph Smith said it said? Nope. Not a single word, not a single character. This is a big fail for Joseph Smith and his claims of being able to translate. Anyway, but the point I want to make here is just that truth matters. Truth is important, and the source of truth, unfortunately, does not come from as a handout from God just saying, here you go, I'm going to give you a little more truth. We earn it as humans. We earn it piece by piece. We spend our blood, sweat, and tears and prove it to one another. And real truth comes from careful study, collaboration, skepticism, persistence, and in the end, clear and verifiable evidence to back up the claims, not as a handout from an all-knowing creator. By the way, I have been thinking a lot about this recently, and one of my friends went to London and said that he was going to be able to go to the British Museum and see the Rosetta Stone. So I told him about how important it is, and he bought this little souvenir and brought it back for me. So now I've been carrying this around as a reminder of what is truth and how hard it is to find truth and how we need to have evidence for truth. So there you go. Let's keep searching for truth. Let's make it important in our lives. I think it's more important now than ever because we have so much disinformation flying around. So many ideas get echoed and amplified when there's no evidence to back them up. So let's prioritize truth and know that it comes from hard work and evidence. And let's do it for goodness sake.